Well, hello there, watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time to see then what's making the headlines with the political editors of The Guardian and The Sun, Pippa Crerar and Harry Cole, who will be with us from now until just before midnight, and great to see you both. So, front pages then, let us take a look at The Eye, which describes the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, as fighting for her political life, of allegations of inhumane conditions at migrant facilities and her handling of emails containing sensitive security information. It's the same story for The Guardian. The headline, Braverman increases the refugee rhetoric as pressure to quit grows. Alarm at Braverman's immigration rhetoric, declares The Times. The Metro pictures 3 children being housed at the Manston Migrant Centre in Kent. The Daily Mail quotes the Home Secretary describing the migrant crisis as out of control. In other news, the Telegraph understands the government will stage a dramatic U-turn by raising taxes for every person in the country. That's also the top story for tomorrow's Express. The Financial Times has a story concerning the battery company British Volt and fears of its possible collapse. As the energy crisis continues, the Star hears that rooms on the parliamentary estate in Westminster often have the heating set as high as 30 degrees. And The Sun reports that Netflix have contradicted Prince William's wishes by including his mother's infamous panorama interview in The Crown. Well, a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. So let's get the thoughts then of Pippa Crerar and Harry Cole. And possibly not surprising, Suella Braverman is dominating many of the front pages, including The Guardian. And fighting, I guess you'd describe it on 2 fronts, would you, Harry?
Yeah, well, multiple fronts, and starting her own fires tonight as well. Quite an extraordinary day of we've had a crazy couple of weeks, but to be back in the cabinet after 6 days in the sin bin and to still be the total lightning rod of almost all the negative news today in Westminster is a pretty impressive performance by Suella Braverman. Everyone thought she was going to be sort of down and out, and hanging on by a thread. But this afternoon, when she finally got up onto her feet in the House of Commons at about 5 o'clock tonight, but actually, she gave a pretty punchy performance. Wasn't to everyone's cup of tea, but anyone that thought, she was going to roll over and say, and be quite meek and apologetic, oh no, she doubled down and gave a fairly punchy performance where she basically held her hands up and said, yep, you know what? The asylum system in this country is a joke. It's not working. It's completely failed. And, what are we going to do about it?
To which the opposition were laughing, pointing out that the Tories have actually been in power for quite a long time now. But, The Guardian... Yeah, well, exactly. The Guardian and other newspapers, have her defences. This is about the situation in Kent with refugees being housed for a long time in overcrowded conditions in a place which is only meant to be open for them for 24 hours until they're shipped elsewhere. So did she block hotels? She says she did not. She did not hold up anything that happened there. But indeed, the local MP, a Tory, disagrees with her, Pippa.
Yes, so Roger Gale, who visited the centre yesterday, suggested that 4 weeks ago, before she took over as Home Secretary, the processing centre, and it is just that, people who arrive in the UK are taken there to get their biometrics taken and so on before they're moved on elsewhere. But because there's currently now nowhere to be moved on, because apparently Suella Braverman took the decision that no more hotels should be procured, no more hotel rooms should be procured for them. There's been this huge backlog. So the processing centre can take about 1,600 people. It currently has about 4,000 people in it. It's not designed to have families or children staying there for any length of time. There's people sort of camped up in tents outside. Obviously, the facilities are under huge pressure, and the suggestion is that the staff aren't well equipped enough to be able to deal with this sort of situation. And Roger Gale is amongst those who are pointing the finger of blame at Suella Braverman and saying that actually it was pretty well functioning centre before she took over and changed the situation with onward movement. And therefore is blaming her. She quite clearly today, Harry is absolutely right. She kind of sort of doubled down on the actions that she's taken. She also ramped up the rhetoric, which didn't go down well in all quarters, including with her own party. While it might appeal to some on the right, immigration in general as an issue is obviously a real sort of political hot potato. It also angered many on the left and some of her own MPs who felt that she was insensitive for talking about an invasion on the south coast. That was, of course, a reference to the 40,000 people coming here. Now, I think it's important just to differentiate between the fact that this is a processing centre and sort of the immigration issue more broadly, which obviously is very difficult for anybody to deal with. Solutions that have been suggested, wide ranging as they are, haven't yet, 12 years on, managed to amount to sort of those numbers coming down. It'd be interesting to see whether Rishi Sunak manages that as well, or indeed whether Suella Braverman continues as the Home Secretary who tries to do that on his behalf.
Yes, while you were talking, we had a look at the Metro. Welcome to the UK. A picture there of some of the children held at the Manston Processing Centre after a report by HM Inspectorate of Prisons said that there were no beds for people, no fresh air. In some places, toilet doors weren't allowed to close, which they found inexplicable. And exhausted detainees were simply sleeping on the floor of this converted military centre. But if we look at the eye, Harry, cabinet anger as Braverman fights for her political life. The quote in their sentences in that front page, some cabinet ministers privately question whether Braverman is up to the job. Now, who's saying that? And what is the clamour for her to, well, I don't know what she'd do this time.
It's a tricky one. Look, it's obviously it is a poison chalice, to put it lightly. This has been an issue that's affected multiple Home Secretaries. Priti Patel was quite forthright in her views, but eventually, talked a very, 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 very good game. But actually, these numbers have been ticking up each year. The government have been in power, and there's nothing that what is the option? What is the solution? The argument Braverman is making is actually £2.2 billion is a phenomenal amount of money at a time we're about to go through a fiscal tightening. £150 a night minimum for these hotel rooms. They are running out of stock in terms of 2-star, 3-star, 1-star hotels in the country. We're now into 4-star hotels. Voters are going to think, paying £600 a night for this is absurd, and it is. So the problem is, though, for Braverman is actually if she just needs to sort of come out and be a little bit, I think, more candid and honest about the decisions she's made, rather than trying to say, "Oh, actually, no, I'm not changing anything. It's carrying on, but we need to rip it all up." So she's in a bit of a mess. I think slightly more tactful and perhaps what's the word I'm looking for? Slightly more delicate way of putting some of the things she said today, but the system is clearly unsustainable. She's totally right to say, if 1,000 people arrive each day, where are you going to put them? Serco, one of the private contractors, is looking at all sorts of different schemes now to get old care homes, old schools, possibly even pop-up marquees and tents, getting private landlords to rent out their homes to the Home Office to house migrants. And you just think, this is politically and economically unsustainable, so something has to give. The problem is, the second anyone says we need to do something about this, all hell breaks loose and there's a big screaming match.
Well, the Daily Mail picks up on that point, saying the Home Secretary said it was almost impossible to house all arrivals and it was time to stop pretending that everyone making the crossing to Britain was a refugee in distress. We heard that clearly. But they also go on to pick up on what I would deem to be the other part that she's fighting on, which is the breaking of the ministerial code, the stuff that she resigned about under Liz Truss's leadership. And a letter that she wrote today to the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, in which she outlined 6 other occasions when she had emailed herself government information. Now, this, she implied, was sort of an aide memoir for meetings and interviews that she was doing, a little bit like using a notebook. Does the letter she wrote explaining what happened the first time and the subsequent times get her off the hook on that score, Pippa?
Really, I mean, it kind of raises more questions, actually, as to why she thought it was okay, even if, as she says, that none of these 6 emails concern national security or intelligence agency matters, other sort of sensitive matters, why the Home Secretary was using her private email account and private phone to contact people. In the case of, obviously, laterally, the one that she was sacked over, somebody who outside the Home Office. And there's been a whole load of questions that have been raised today. The timings. She claimed initially in that resignation letter to Liz Truss that she had alerted her civil servants pretty quickly, urgently. Actually, we found out today that we had this sort of timescale of she herself was alerted to the mistake at 10 a.m. and didn't let her private secretary know until about 3 hours later. And actually, the Cabinet Office number 10 found out first. The chief whip basically told her that she needed to inform her officials, but she hadn't really done so by that point. And then there's also this point about the day that she, and Harry's reported this, I've reported this as well, the day that she went, number 10 was briefing out that one of the reasons she went was because the details of this written ministerial statement that was leaked was potentially market moving, because it obviously was about immigration and the potential that has on the OBR forecasts. And then today we were told by number 10 that actually it wasn't market moving. Now, which is it? Who was telling the truth there? So I think the letter and all sort of the security implications around it have raised some more questions about her. And also, frankly, raising questions about Rishi Sunak's judgment, because he reappointed her 6 days after she was sacked for the security breach. We all know that was because some deal was struck in order to get her to support him in the Tory leadership contest and get him over the line. Problem is that's put him in a difficult position now. She is sort of like the standard bearer of the right, if you like, of the ERG in his cabinet. He wants to keep the party united. If he comes under great pressure to get rid of her, if there's more revelations, for example, in the weeks ahead, it'd be very difficult for him squaring that with the right of his party. So, it's not just about the political sensitivities around immigration, which on their own are a pretty major issue. It's also about sort of the political fallout and the sort of impact on him.
Yes, and also from the Conservative MPs, including Andrew Percy, whose staff member had accidentally received this document that Liz Truss had sent erroneously. In this letter that she wrote, included the email from Mr Percy MP saying, I'm really not sure that government documents should be being shared with members of your former campaign team via email. Simply asking my team to delete this email and ignore it is not an acceptable response to what appears on the face of it to be a potentially serious breach of security. I mean, frustrations there even on the day of this, Harry.
Yeah, I think the problem that Suella Braverman's got, I think she has probably done enough to sort of get it all out there and give a clear enough explanation. It's clearly got past her sort of permanent secretary who's sort of signed this letter off. The problem is, what it fundamentally comes down to is, why was she going to write this ministerial statement that she leaked? Or why was Liz Truss making her write this ministerial statement? It was to try and affect and change the OBR growth forecast. Now, if the contents of a written ministerial statement would change the forecast of the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, by its very nature, that is market-sensitive information, because you're literally trying to move a regulator into saying the markets are going to like this, so therefore it's a good thing. So I don't really understand how she's in any position to say it's not market-sensitive, but there we go. But Pippa's right. This is all about politics. This was a nakedly political act to appoint Suella Braverman, and we've seen the consequences of that at the dispatch box today. It was quite ironic that it came less than 24 hours that Rishi Sunak stood on the steps of Downing Street saying, I'm above politics, so I'm going to put the country first. For a man who spent a year agitating to get that job and now got it, and then cut a deal in its first act, yeah, it does jar a bit.
OK, we'll see where that heads, if I can put it that way. Plenty more still to come, though, including, contrary to what the government promised a few weeks ago, tax increases could soon be on the way for everyone. Back with that in just a moment. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me once again, Pippa Crerar and Harry Cole. Welcome back to both of you. So let's go to the Daily Telegraph, Pippa, shall we? Sweeping tax rises. For who exactly? What does the paper say?
Well, it suggests, this is obviously a Treasury briefing that has come out today and has gone to what I would describe as the friendly newspapers, although one government advisor says to me that there's no such thing as friendlies anymore, which I think you could probably agree with, seeing some of the front pages that they've put up with in recent days and weeks. Anyway, sorry, back to the point. As we all know, there's a very big black hole in the public finances. In the public finances were in a pretty precarious position anyway, and then that mini budget made things worse. And since Jeremy Hunt took over as Chancellor, and Rishi Sunak made it back to number 10. They've obviously ripped it up, started again, pushed back the date for the budget by a couple of weeks to the middle of next month, middle of November. And are going through a whole series of ways in which they can plug that gap, which Telegraph and others suggest is about £50 billion. Now, it's no surprise that public service cuts are on the agenda, or indeed that tax rises are on the agenda. And the suggestion in the Telegraph is that you're going to look at pretty much half of that black hole being filled by tax cuts and half of it being filled by cuts to public spending. Obviously, that raises quite a lot of problems, quite a lot of issues. Politically, it's going to be very difficult. And this, to me, is very much a way of the Treasury, the government trying to really sort of roll the pitch, if you like, which, as we all know, didn't happen, with quite catastrophic consequences at the last mini budget. Roll the pitch to warn people that there will be tough times ahead. And on the public sector spending part of that, obviously many departments feel that they really cut to the bone already after 12 years of austerity. Public sector pay is a particular issue. Some suggestion that could only go up by a couple of percent, when obviously inflation is substantially higher than
Pippa,
that.
let me bring in, we've got only a minute left. I want to get Harry's view on this one as well. A rough road ahead exactly. Half of it on tax rises, half of it on spending cuts. Both feel ugly to people, don't they?
I mean, I watch this stuff, day in, day out as a job, and I feel like I've got whiplash. I can remember, old enough to remember in July when Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt were all saying, let's cut corporation tax, Jeremy Hunt was saying, let's cut corporation tax. Rishi Sunak was unveiling his path to 3 pence off of income tax over the next 3 years. Liz Truss obviously was the one that got to pull the lever, and it turned out to be a trap door. I do suspect there's probably a little bit of setting the scene here.